Howdy partners, it's so good to be here again. As you may have noticed, I started working on my year-end list for 2024. They are coming up, and so here I am catching up on the last remaining 2024 films that I have yet to see, and there's still a few that haven't come out yet in Montreal, so I will be catching up on those as soon as I can. And as you may have noticed, I'm a little late to the party with the film Wicked. And if you do follow my channel, you may have noticed that this film is pretty much as far away from my usual taste in film as it could possibly be. I'm definitely much more on the indie, art house, experimental, and just these really weird, disturbing films, generally speaking. For example, Nosferatu was my kind of cup of tea for Christmas. And also all the months leading up to the film, I saw the trailer for Wicked like 5,000 times in the cinema. And I honestly thought that it would be a skip for me. I literally had the thoughts going through my head of, oh my god, is Hollywood making yet another remake? Do they have any original ideas to offer up to the table? And though that comment still has its own pertinence, I do also want to highlight just how out of the loop and how much I'm not the target audience for this film. For example, I didn't even know that this was an adaptation of a Broadway show. Yeah, if that's not proof to show you that I've been living in a cave and blissfully ignorant of these things, I don't know what will satisfy you. And for the longest time, I didn't even know that this film would be a musical. And indeed, with all the trailers that I have seen, it didn't really give that impression. And even after its release, it didn't even say in any of the posters that this would be just part one of that story. Bit of weird marketing in that regard, but anyways, I digress. A lot of my friends have been talking about it, and there has been quite a lot of awards buzz centered around this film. So I thought, you know what? Maybe I am becoming just a bit of an old goat and just kind of stuck in my ways. So I thought, okay, let's go see it. What's the worst that can happen? And you know what? I was pleasantly surprised overall. Musicals still ain't my bag, but I will say I rather enjoyed myself. The story and character development through the lyrics I found was quite compelling. It tackles on a lot of these universal issues, specifically the injustice of racism, which I do find it clever that our protagonist Elphaba is quite literally colored. So I do think that's a very clever way of addressing that issue. But overall, this is a very thoughtful drama in this very pop culture context, even if the drama itself isn't explored in all that much nuanced depth. Though one thing is for certain, it is very entertaining. In fact, I'd say my favorite part of the musicals isn't so much the songs, but the choreography themselves. You can tell that the performers put their heart and soul in the song and dance. And I kind of love the often dynamic environments that these songs would be happening in. However, there was one moment in the film that generally made me a little upset. Our Prince Charming archetype in this film, Prince Fiero if I recall correctly, he totally trampled and trashed all of our books in the library. Are you kidding me? He should be cancelled immediately for that. I literally felt like Elphaba at that moment in the film where she told herself like, I gotta get out of here, I want to read my books in peace and quiet, not in this chaos. Lord have mercy. That aside, the visual crop of this film is kind of spectacular. For once, it actually feels like a Hollywood film uses its gigantic budget to actual effect. Wicked does have a $150 million budget, which nowadays is relatively smaller in comparison to these other behemoths that totally eclipse it in terms of its scope, but yet manages to be a shallow pond when it comes to its emotional depth. So it is refreshing to see a film that is so vibrant, visually spellbinding, and quite passionate too. Yeah, all the work put into the crafting of the set, the props, the costumes are so rich in detail and personality, and the lighting is the cherry on top of this cake. Truly A+ in that regard. And even the CGI of the animals who are talking to us as if they were human didn't feel too uncanny. It is a little bit of a tightrope to make these kind of visual things not feel too weird, but I think they pulled it off as good as it could have been. So round of applause on that. But I'd say for me personally, the part of the visual of this film that stood out the most will be the vibrant colors. Indeed, green and pink do go very well together, which we could say the same in equal measure for our dual lead protagonist over here, played by a brilliant Ariana Grande, and especially Cynthia Erivo, who plays Elphaba. Yeah, there's a lot of complex technical stuff when it comes to the singing itself, which is no surprise for Ariana Grande perhaps. But there's also really interesting emotional quality around these two characters. Seeing that they're quite a contrast from each other, they're as different as they could possibly be, yet nonetheless for all their differences, their friendship kind of blossoms and roots itself in quite an interesting way throughout the journey of this film. And I have to say there's one scene in particular in this film that's quite riveting. There'll be this dance hall scene where there's this totally wordless spoken dance sequence. As far as I'm concerned, this was the most emotional moment of the entire film. Now, I wouldn't say it was quite so powerful to get me teary-eyed, The same can't be said for the two old ladies that were sitting next to me. They were sniffling throughout the entire film, which was kind of cute and endearing. And I imagine a lot of other people might have had a similar emotional resonance with this film. Once again, I'm not exactly the target audience, but still I gotta say there were a few moments that started getting under my skin. Now, if I had to put on my critical thinking hat for a moment here, I do find that the plot is maybe a little paper thin, and it's also a little predictable. I mean, I think most of the world has seen The Wizard of Oz, or even if you haven't seen it, you at least know on a macro level of what the story is. I definitely know what that story is. Not only have I seen the film, but it was also the Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz play in my elementary school. Yeah, I got my diploma, I got my brains. MI, SSI, PPI, right? I think so. Shit. I hope I didn't mess that up. I did get my diploma, okay? I got my brains now. But anyways, even if you haven't seen The Wizard of Oz, the intro of this film itself kind of pretty much tells you what the end point is going to be anyways, so you don't have to be a Sherlock Holmes to figure out what's going to happen. And I do find it interesting that we get to see this origin story of the Wicked Witch and realize that, hey, you know what, she was kind of human too. And I do think it is worth seeing the steps that brought her to become the person that she is today. But honestly, I feel like if this part one was all that I ever got, I think that'll be more than enough origin story for me to figure out like, oh, okay, that's enough for me to bridge the gap until The Wizard of Oz. I got all I needed to know, especially in this 3-hour epic journey over here, which leads me to wonder, like, what else is there left to explore in the second act of this film? I mean, I haven't seen the Broadway, obviously, since I didn't even know it existed, so maybe there are some surprises left in store that are worth exploring. Perhaps, but I do kind of feel that this is a typical Hollywood cookie cutter formula of having this really epic grand finale where the scale and scope and conflict of it all has to just be ratcheted up to giant proportions. Maybe I'll be wrong, we'll see. And as a final comment, I did mention that it was nearly 3 hours long, which I did not expect, and I didn't mind it that much. In fact, I'd say it went down pretty smooth, all things considered. Especially the fact that this is a musical, reminding you once again that usually this isn't my cup of tea. But for the children in the theater, there were quite a few of them, I say it's a little trying. After the 1 hour mark, they started getting a little chatty. So what, are we gonna get involved with yet another 3-hour film like that? I guess only time will tell a year from now, but I do think it's maybe a little much for the youngest audience. Though I gotta say, I was pleasantly surprised with this film. I really did feel like a bit of an old goat walking in this film, seeing just how much I was hating on this film after all those trailers that I got overexposed to, but I do love being proved wrong every now and then. This is kind of fun. So I'd say this is a 7.5 out of 10, which, once again, if you take into consideration my usual taste in film, this might as well be an 8,000 out of 10. What can I tell you? As the famous saying goes, variety is the spice of life. So with all that being said, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. Take care and talk to you soon.